Monday, January 16th, 2023, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So, the World Economic Forum is having its winter jamboree in Davos starting from tomorrow. But what we're going to do today, though, is look at the origins of the World Economic Forum and how the World Economic Forum's dream might be in peril, which I would say is not a bad thing. So before we start, though, we're going to reference a book that I bought over 10 years ago, just after the 08 crisis. And it's entitled A Pocketbook of Gold, A Survival Manual for Monetary Mayhem by Jim Sinclair and Peter Carlin. I respect Jim Sinclair a lot because when I started buying gold back in 2002, the reason I did it was for diversification. We just had the dot-com bubble burst. My private pension had lost a lot of value, and I thought, my wife and I started talking, and we said maybe we should buy a little bit of gold. And that opened my eyes to a whole new world, because once you buy gold, or at least me, I started looking into the monetary system and how important gold is. And before we look at some interesting passages from this book, just to let you know, many of you have asked me, of course, in the past where they can buy gold. So if you're interested, there are some precious metals dealers below in the description that I use, and I recommend people use them as well. I think they're trustworthy. In the UK, it's Gold Investments. Promo code there is Maneco64. In the US, it's ITM Trading. You can call them, contact them. If you've never invested in gold, they'll help you with strategies on how to protect and even increase your wealth through precious metals. And also Miles Franklin and Andy Schechtman. All the details are below in the description. So Jim Sinclair, he's known as Mr. Gold. He was the top gold guy back in the 70s, and he actually got out of gold, not completely, of course, but he used to trade it. And he got out at the top in January 1980 from the futures positions he had. I'm sure he's always held physical gold, and he actually bought treasury bonds because they're yielding double digits, and he knew what was coming. He knew that a couple of decades of disinflation, not deflation, just lower inflation rates was coming, and that bonds were going to do well. But he's been warning since the beginning of the century, since 2002, when I started following his blog, that you need to have some gold. So we're going to look at quickly here what he describes gold as, what gold is. So in chapter 1, it's entitled Why Own Gold? And he actually quotes Ludwig von Mises and the crack-up boom. And I'll read through this again, and a lot of you have probably heard of this because I've spoken about this a lot. It says, there is no means of avoiding a final collapse of a boom brought about by credit expansion. And that's what we've had since 08, or even since 71, I would say. The alternative is only whether the crisis should come sooner as a result of a voluntary abandonment of further credit expansion, or later as a final and total catastrophe of the currency system, invoked Ludwig von Mises. Well, I think the latter is going to be what's going to happen, because our politicians, our central bankers, they want to save Wall Street. They want to save the governments, and by governments I mean the government spending. So they're going to keep inflating, even though they're pretending they're fighting it right now. So just go quickly through what Jim Sinclair thinks gold is. He says gold is insurance, right? He says, gold allows you to be your own central bank. Gold bypasses government. Gold does not expose you to counterparty risk. And that's why it's always important to have it in physical form, not in the financial system, in GLD or futures or whatever. Gold cannot be produced ad infinitum. So what I wanted to cover in this book, though, is what's going on right now with the government debt market. We're seeing interest rates rise, and they're going to keep rising, in my opinion, for the next few decades. And what that's doing, it's ruining the central bankers' balance sheets, because they bought all these bonds when rates were really low. And hopefully by now a lot of you know that when bond yields go up, their prices go down. When yields go down, their prices go up. So when they're doing QE and the bond market was in the bull market and yields were coming down like they had been since the early 80s up until 2021, everything was fine for the balance sheets, and they were paying their treasuries profits as well. But now it's the other way around, and this is what I wanted to cover here. It's on page 69, and it says, gold is a measure of government debt and the ability or willingness to repay such debt. And as long as bond yields and interest rates were able to be kept low, repaying the debt was not a problem for governments, because even with a massive amount of debt like we've had in the last 10, 15 years, the interest service on the debt was not a problem. But now with yields going up, it's becoming a problem already, and we're seeing that. So this is why the price of gold seems to be going up right now. And why do I say seems? Well, because it's not. It's the dollar and the other currencies that are going down, and it reflects on as a higher price of gold. So he says the debasement of the British monetary system begins in earnest with debt expansion. First, silver standards were debased, and eventually nickel and then copper coins were introduced. This type of dilution is also the exact recent history of American and European coinage. Remember when American coins had silver content? Well, that was up until 1964. In the past decade, the Russian ruble and the Argentinian peso also collapsed as debts were defaulted on. As in the case of Iceland in 2008, the holder of gold sidestepped the financial effects of these defaults. Those left holding the currency were decimated repeatedly in a very short space of time. Take note. So there you go. We're going to stop at that. And we're going to go and look at the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, Davos in Switzerland. Yes, I have family in Switzerland, but this is not really the way I would say the average Swiss thinks. And I think the globalists use Switzerland as a base because Switzerland respects private property. It's a relatively free country, so they've been able to base themselves there and stay under the radar, I would say. And by the way, I've never been to Davos. It's not near where my family is. So when we were under lockdown back in 2020, and we're hearing a lot about the fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset, the opportunity that Klaus Schwab said we had now with what was happening back then, I started looking a little deeper, and I found a lot of interesting information. And I wrote it in my blog, maneco64.net, back on June 11th, 2020. The origins of the World Economic Forum go back to the Third Reich. Yes, the Third Reich. And one thing I'm proud of from this article is that one of my followers listened to one of my videos where I talked about this and forwarded it to Michael Matt, of the Remnant Video YouTube channel. And I met Michael Matt and the follower who forwarded him my video about the World Economic Forum last year in Italy at a conference, which was very nice. But Michael Matt made a video afterwards, after he watched my video, The Great Reset, Davos and the Plot to Cancel Trump. And this video got millions of views, I think 3.2 million views. So, and this was over 2 years ago. I think it was just after I did my video on the World Economic Forum. So he's opened a lot of eyes to the World Economic Forum. And I'm going to put a link to this video up in the cards and in the description so you can watch it if you haven't yet. So let's go through my article. It's not very long. I'm going to put a link to it in the description. Origins of the World Economic Forum. We have recently seen the WEF announce the Great Reset and the launch of Dr. Klaus Schwab's Fourth Industrial Revolution. Even Prince Charles of England got involved in the action. Well, he's King Charles now, of course. Here's a great video by Spiros Skouras about the so-called Great Reset. The Great Reset plan revealed. How COVID ushers in the new world order. So there's a link to that video there as well. I'm not going to go through it right now. I'll put it up in the cards if it's still there. I haven't checked. I highly recommend you watch it if you want to find out even more about this shadowy organization called the World Economic Forum. Dr. Schwab and his globalist friends certainly did not let a crisis go to waste, as Israel Emanuel, former mayor of Chicago and President Obama's chief of staff, once advised or said. Dr. Schwab and his globalist friends have been planting the seeds of their fourth industrial revolution and their reset since 1971, or maybe even before that. The World Economic Forum, which organizes the Davos Summit every winter in Davos, Switzerland, started out as the European Management Forum, yes, the EMF, in 1972. What is interesting about the EMF is that its major patron was Altiero Spinello, who was a member of the Commission of the European Communities, which was the forerunner of the European Commission. The chairman of the EMF was a German banker by the name of Dr. Hermann J. Abs. And there's a link there to the PDF from the World Economic Forum that talks about these two guys. It's all documented. So let's have a look at who was Altiero Spinelli and who was Dr. Hermann Abs. According to Wikipedia, Mr. Spinelli was once a member of the Italian Communist Party and one of the founding fathers of the European Union. Before I look into Dr. Abs' biography or background, let's look at what this World Economic Forum document says about Dr. Schwab's background. So, born in Ravensburg, Germany in 1938, Schwab grew up during the tumultuous post-World War II Reconstruction period in Europe. He was heavily involved in efforts to promote reconciliation between German and French youth. His father was the managing director of a Swiss machinery company who led several industries and business associations. So now let's look at Dr. Abs and who he was. This is the interesting part here. And I think he was supposed to have attended in 72, but people woke up to his background and he did not attend. But he was a chairman of the European Management Forum. So according to Adam Libor in his great book about the Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, entitled The Tower of Basel, this is what he writes about Dr. Abs on page 153 and 154. And I've got that book, of course, and I've recommended it to you. So I'm quoting here the passage from the Tower of Basel. The members of the committee, the BIS Committee for Foreign Economic Affairs, included Hermann Abs of Deutsche Bank, the most powerful commercial banker in the Third Reich. The dapper, elegant Abs was an old friend of the BIS. He had been sent there by Schacht, Hitler's banker, during the 1930s to try and stall demands for repayments of the loans that financed Germany after 1918. Adam Libor adds the following about Abs on page 154. As the head of Deutsche Bank's foreign department during the war, Abs was the linchpin of the continent-wide plunder, directing the absorption of Aryanized banks and companies across the Third Reich. During the 12 years of the Third Reich, the bank's wealth quadrupled. Abs sat on the board of dozens of companies, including, naturally, IG Farben. One would have expected Dr. Hermann Joseph Abs would have been found guilty of war crimes and maybe imprisoned or even hung at Nuremberg. But even back then, bankers seem to have been above the law. Here's what the Tower of Basel says about Dr. Abs' escape from justice on pages 187-188. Hermann Abs of Deutsche Bank was the most powerful commercial banker in the Third Reich, and he was not on Dulles' A-list. Rather, he was high on the Allied blacklist of important Nazi officials to be arrested. In the American zone, Colonel Bernard Bernstein, the head of the finance division, had Abs indeed, all the Nazi financiers in his sights. Bernstein ordered that every banker and industrialist be detained as suspected criminal. Adam Libor continues. Luckily for Abs, he was living in the British zone. There he met his old friend Charles Guston of the Bank of England, whom he used to see in Basel during the 1930s at BIS meetings. Guston had no interest in the Nazi atrocities. All he cared about was getting the banks working again. Guston asked Abs to help rebuild the banking system in the British zone. Abs was more than happy to oblige. Bernstein was enraged and demanded that Abs be extradited to the American zone. Guston refused, but in early January 1946, he returned to England. Abs was then finally arrested as a suspected war criminal, and he spent 3 months in prison before being released and was never charged. Instead, Abs went to work, fulfilling his promise to his old friend Charles Guston. The interesting point about Dr. Schwab's background, as seen above, is that his father was a German industrialist, and we know that Dr. Abs was the most influential or important commercial banker in the Third Reich. And when he was chairman of the European Management Forum, the predecessor of the World Economic Forum, he was about 7 years old, while Dr. Schwab was in his early 30s. And this is just speculation, of course. Is it possible that Dr. Abs was an old friend of the Schwab family? I guess some research about Schwab's father is required, but I think it's more than enough to connect the World Economic Forum with the Third Reich, seeing that the most powerful, influential commercial banker during the Third Reich was the chairman of the European Management Forum in 1972. Yes, that is the precursor to the World Economic Forum. I have noticed that the World Economic Forum, which markets itself as an innocent NGO or non-governmental organization, has a very big presence on Facebook and pushes its fourth industrial revolution agenda on that social media platform with almost 8.5 million followers. So next time you see a posting on Facebook and the World Economic Forum, just remember who were the people behind the formation of this NGO. So before we look at the markets, just quickly look at this article that came out last night, and I tweeted about it, I said one of the most encouraging headlines I've seen in the last few years, and it's from a guy that is a globalist. He's a journalist for the FT. He goes to Davos every year. He's there this year. Says geopolitics threatens to destroy the world Davos made. And some people believe they have no influence. So why would Gideon Rachman say that it was Davos that made the world we're in, right? So he's admitting there that they pull a lot of strings. And stakeholder capitalism that Klaus Schwab uses a lot, this term, is nothing more than the cooperation between big corporations and government. It's the definition of corporatism, or even that F word that Mussolini was so famous for. So I'm going to put a link to Gideon Rachman's article in the description under archive.ph so you can read it. But suffice it to say, he thinks the geopolitical situation, economic, is probably threatening the Davos agenda. It's interesting, he says here as well, in recent years, Davos has attracted the ire of anti-vaxxers, climate change skeptic, religious zealots, and hardline nationalists. The forum features in a range of conspiracy theories. Well, we're seeing a lot of those theories become fact. On the wild internet fringes, the WF has been accused of using the pandemic to seize control of the world economy. Well, at the same time, though, he admits geopolitics threatens to destroy the world Davos made. So he admits it. And then he goes on to say that actually, maybe we are having some impact, because he says, such theories aside, the idea that Davos is faintly toxic has gained ground. President Joe Biden, determined to present himself as fighting for ordinary working Americans, is unlikely to risk an appearance at Davos. Unlike Donald Trump, who enjoyed rubbing shoulders with assembled CEOs, apparently Macron and Sunak are also not attending. And what's interesting is that there was a novel written back in 1914 called The Magic Mountain. And it was set in Davos, and it was supposed to be happening 100 years hence, around now. And it was about a pandemic and some kind of war, which is very weird anyway. So read this FT article if you've got some time. And yeah, I think it's encouraging, and it's interesting that he admits that it's the world they built, and at the same time he says it's a conspiracy theory to say so. So to the markets now. It's 8:15 a.m. London time. Spot gold is trading at $19.1350. It's down about $6. High's been $19.29, so we've made a new high. Gold, of course, is still trading fairly well technically, I would say. Silver is at $24.17. High's been 52, and it's down about 7 cents right now. The stock market futures indices are down about 0.2 across the board. Today is a federal holiday in the U.S. We won't look at the bond market because that's closed, U.S. Treasuries. To the currencies, we got sterling down 0.2% at 122.07. We've got the euro down slightly at 108.17. And the dollar's gaining a bit of ground against the yen. It's up 0.5% at 128.50. It looks like the Bank of Japan is probably ready to do even more QE, trying to stop JGB yields from going, the 10-year JGB yield from going above 0.5. Dollar's up slightly versus the yuan at 672.95. Let's check out the dollar versus the ruble. Yeah, dollar's up slightly at 68.33. To the other currencies here, Aussie dollar is down 0.2 at 69.65. Dollar's up slightly versus the Canadian dollar, 134.09. And the Kiwi dollar is unchanged, 63.81. Platinum is trading at 1,060, is down about $9. So we're seeing things move down a little bit here today in terms of the precious metals. WTI crude, that's down just under 1% at 79.40. Brent is down 1% at 84.60. High grade copper is down 1% as well at 417. And yes, with that, I'm going to wish you all a great start to the week. Take care. Bye.